So again, the very first thing you'll do is come up with your base image. And we can actually get a Windows base image right off of the installation media. In fact, inside of the sources directory, and I'll show you this when we get over to the virtual lab, there is an install.wim. That's a Windows image file, and it actually contains 4 images. Think of a WIM file as kind of a container, right? It's a zip file for images. Well, those 4 images are server core, both data center and standard, and the desktop experience, data center and standard. And in the nano server directory, there is a nanoserver.wim, and that contains 2 images, one for a nano server standard and one for a nano server data center. So we can use these as a starting point. We can customize them and then pull them in to WDS for mass deployment. And by the way, you can also use Windows deployment services to create capture images from a reference machine. And by the way, we actually get into this in 70-411, our Server 2012 course. Check out Nuggets 3 and 4 to see everything you need to know about WDS. We even use the virtual lab to deploy an image over the network and install it onto a bare metal machine. So if you're new to this image stuff in WDS, I would highly advise checking those 2 nuggets out because it'll give you the big picture. Now, the primary tool that we have been using for years in Windows to manage, maintain, and service our images is an old command line utility known as DISM. That's the Deployment Image Servicing and Management Utility. We use this directly against our WIMs, or we can also use it against our virtual hard drives, VHDs and VHDXs. The process is fairly simple. We mount our WIMs or VHDs, and then we execute DISM commands to do things like enable or disable Windows features, to add drivers and packages, to add files and data into the image, all kinds of things. And when we're done, we unmount it and save the changes. We're going to walk through that whole process in the virtual lab here shortly. And we're going to begin with the old DISM command line utility. Microsoft also provides us with a DISM Powershell module containing all kinds of DISM commandlets that we can use to accomplish the same tasks that we do with the old utility. But you should definitely know both of them. Here's why. Not only for exam purposes, but also for the real world. Learn this one for the past because it's been around for so long that it's everywhere and you're going to need to support it and understand it at some point. And then learn PowerShell here for the future because that's where everything is headed. All right, let's jump into the virtual lab and learn how to service our images using DISM and PowerShell. We have a single machine in this lab. I've already logged in, so let's go ahead and begin by launching File Explorer. Now, if we scroll down to the left, the first thing I want to show you here is where these image files reside. So we have the Server 2016 installation media mounted to the DVD drive. If we give that a click and go into the sources directory and start typing in install.wim, there is our Windows image file. Again, that contains 4 of our base Windows operating systems, data center and standard for both core and the desktop experience. If we head back, we also have that nano server directory, and there is the nano server WIM. And again, that contains those 2 base images for a nano server. Now let's head into the C drive and into the Nugget Lab directory. If we head into images, I actually copied both of those off of the installation media into this directory. That way they're writable and we can work with them. So we're gonna work by modifying these base Windows images and adding some things into them like drivers and packages and roles and features and all that fun stuff. If we head back to the Nugget Lab directory, I also have a drivers directory containing a couple of drivers there. Those are Intel's mass storage drivers, so we're going to add those in there. We also have an updates directory containing a couple of the more recent updates here for Server 2016. And then we also have a VHDs directory containing our NanoNug VHDX, just to show you here that we can also use DISM to modify a VHD. Process is exactly the same. We're still going to need to mount it, and then we can execute DISM commands against it to change what's in that VHD. So let's start here by launching our pscommands.ps1 file, again in our Nugget Lab directory. Give that a right click and choose Edit. Once the ISE fires up here, hit that open button on the toolbar. Again, we're going to start here with the old command line utility. So we're going to open up another file here, drop down the file types and either choose text file or all files, called CLI commands.txt. Open that up. We can use the ISE here to execute these old legacy commands as well. So we're going to begin by working with install.wim right inside of our images directory here. Again, this is what contains the desktop experience and server core installation options and both editions for each. That's why we have 4 OSs packaged inside of that WIM. And let's start here by just running a DISM with the question mark parameter. This will show us all of the top level commands. If we scroll up here, you'll also get a little description. Here it is, DISM enumerates, installs, uninstalls, configures, so on and so forth. We've got generic imaging commands. We're going to be using a few of these here. We need to run mount in order to mount it. We also run an unmount, and then we've got switches on there to commit or discard our changes. We're also going to run a get image info here initially just to take a peek inside to see what's inside of those WIM files. We also have a lot of WIM commands here for working with WIMs. So you can do total WIM management here, like listing what images are inside of them, exporting them, adding to them, splitting them. You can also capture an image using DISM here. And if we head down further, we can do this against an online operating system. So we could run DISM against our running OS here to make changes, but more commonly, you're going to do this against your offline images. And that's what it's showing us here. We can do it online or offline against an image. And we've got some other just high-level options here as well. I'll show you how you can get better help on subcommands as we go through this. But I'm going to hit Control-R here to go back to the script pane. So let's begin by taking a peek inside of that install.wim file. Let's see what images it contains. And that's what the get image info parameter is used for. So we run DISM get image info, and then we pass in the path using the image file parameter here to our install.wim. So I'm going to place my cursor on that line, hit run selection, and it's going to go peek inside of that WIM and show us all 4 of those images. There it is. So, and this is the evaluation edition that we're working with, by the way, but here is server core. Here is the desktop experience, both for standard edition, and here's data center edition, server core, and the desktop experience. So this index is important because in order to mount the image, we're going to need to pass into our next commandlet what index we want to mount, what image we want to mount. So I'm going to hit Control-R to go back here once again and check it out. That's going to be our next one here. We're going to use DISM mount image. Pass in the path to our image file, pass in our index, and then where we want to mount it to. That's why we have a mount dir back here, because in our another lab directory, that's where we're going to mount this image to. You need to mount it before we can do anything against that image. And can you guess which one we're going to do here with an index of 3? If I hit Control-R to go back to our result pane here, here it is right here. Yeah, we're going to mount the Data Center Edition server core installation option here inside of that WIM file. So I'm going to go ahead and hit run selection here, and this is just going to take a second to mount it. And while that's going on here, I'm going to go back to split screen as well. So let me head back down to the bottom, and you're going to see here, it's going to go through and give us a little progress bar in the result pane. All right, we are mounted. Now, if we head back to our another lab directory and go right into that mount directory, check it out. There is the file system. So yeah, we can easily modify the file system right here by making changes inside of the directory that we mounted it to. So we could add files in here, add folders, do whatever we need to graphically, very easily. And by the way, before we commit these changes, you cannot be inside of this directory. So make sure that you are outside of it or our commit will fail. Now, if you wanted to get help on any of that, what you can do is after your subcommand, type in that question mark switch. And I'm just going to highlight just that bit of code there. And if we hit run, this is going to give us help on mount image, tell us what it does, and also give us some examples. Very, very nice and easy to get a hang of the syntax here for each one of these commands. All right, so now that we're mounted, let's begin by adding things into this image. And we're going to start by injecting drivers into it. So again, back in our another lab directory, we have a drivers directory. In there, we have 2 drivers. Now, you can add individual drivers in by specifying a path. You can add all the drivers in a directory in, and you can even use the recurse parameter, which I'll show you here shortly, to add drivers and all the drivers and all the subfolders inside of a directory. But let's begin simple here, just by seeing what we have as far as drivers go in this image. And this is only going to return custom drivers. So this should actually return nothing. See that? Obtaining list of third-party drivers from the driver store, nothing was found. All right, let's fix that. Let's add both of those drivers in. So again, here we're just going to specify the path to that directory, which will just add all the drivers in that specific directory. If we had subfolders in there, we could add the recurse parameter, and that would go through all the subdirectories and add all the drivers. Anything INF it saw, it would add that, and then add the actual driver into it. Or you could also just pass in a specific path as well, just to add a single driver. But we're going to add both drivers into this. So let's highlight or place your cursor on line 17 there, hit execute, and that's going to run through, read the INFs, and pull those drivers into this image. Done. Now, if we run our previous command, we should see information for both of these drivers. And there it is in list format. And by the way, if you want to get help for this stuff, just add a question mark onto the end of your command, and this will get us help here for get drivers as well as some examples. Check it out. Pretty cool. So you can do that, add a question mark to the end of any of these commands or subcommands, and it'll give you that nice help topic. So if you wanted to see even system drivers that come with Windows, you could add the alt switch on the end of that. Now let's say, you know what, we didn't want that second driver, we only wanted the first one. Here's where the remove driver switch comes into play. So we're going to remove one of those drivers, And that when we get it over to PowerShell, we'll add that one back in. But let's go ahead and execute line number 18 here. Place your cursor on the line, hit run selection, and that's going to remove that driver from the image. And it's gone. Now, if you were to run a get drivers again, it would only show the other driver inside of it. So that's how we can inject drivers into an image. We can also inject packages into our image. So things like patches, hotfixes, updates. These are MSU and cabs, and you can download these from Microsoft's Windows Update Catalog. In fact, that's exactly what I did. If we head back to the file system here into the Nugget Lab directory and into the updates directory, I've got a couple of updates in here. One of them is a critical update, and one of them is a patch. So on that site, I did a search for Windows Server 2016 and then just sorted by the date. You can see all of the latest updates. So what we'll do here is you can run a get packages. This will show you all the packages that are already on in that image. We can also run an add package and specify the path. Again, this will add all of the packages. You could use the recurse parameter in here to add any packages inside of subdirectories, but we've got a couple of MSUs there. I'm going to go ahead and run line 22 here. What that's going to do is add both of those packages into our image. Done. And now if we run a get packages, we should be able to see those packages. And if you wanted to remove a package, you can use the remove package with the package name parameter and specify the name of that package. You can get that name here from the get packages. This is the name that you're going to want to supply right here, the package identity property. And there's one of them that we just added right there. It shows you the install time of that package. Another common thing to do is install roles and features. Here we can use the get features parameter here just to get a list of all the features available in that image, whether they're installed or not. We can also drill in to a specific feature to see its state and information about it. Then we can enable and disable features as well. So let's start here with just a big list here of all the features that are available, whether they're installed or not, and they'll be either enabled or disabled. And you'll see as this flies by, some of them will be enabled, all the base stuff, and then all the extra stuff here will be disabled. There it is. So you can see storage services is enabled, for example, but the file server role is disabled. Let's say that we wanted to get more information about the IIS web server role, and that's the system name here, by the way, through DISM is IIS-web server. So let's go ahead and execute that line, and that'll just give us information about this role, its description, its current state, and some other information. There it is. Now, these are all the custom properties. If you scroll up a little bit here, we can see that its current state is disabled. So let's enable it. Very simple. Just use the enable feature parameter here. Again, specify the name of the role or feature, and then we'll also install all of the sub-features underneath that role. So let's go ahead and run this. And there it is. Cool. We just installed the web server role inside of an image. Now, if we were to run the previous line again here, this time it should show as enabled rather than disabled. Just scroll up a little bit and look at that. We are now enabled. And then if you wanted to disable any existing roles and features, you can run the disable feature. Again, pass in the feature name, and that'll turn off. I'm going to leave ours on. Now, all of those changes we've made so far are not yet baked into the image. We've just simply added them to our temporary mount point. So this is where we need to unmount and either commit or discard those changes. So a discard here will just throw them away and nothing will happen. And you may need to do this from time to time because some of these things are one-way operations, so you may need to start over. But if you're confident everything is good, then you can unmount it and run a commit. So unmount image, this time rather than passing a parameter to the actual image that's mounted, we pass it to the mount point itself and then run a commit. And this will save all of that work we just did back into the image. I'm going to go ahead and run this. All right, all those changes are now in. So if we were to install an operating system onto a machine using this image, it would already have a web server on it, those drivers and packages and everything ready to go. Now, we can also use DISM to service our nano server images. Although, again, most of the time you'll probably use the edit nano server image commandlet, but a lot of the same rules apply here. We can inject drivers and updates. We can't enable roles and features because there are none on nano server, but we can add packages. In fact, let's do that right now. Let's start by taking a peek inside of that nano server WIM file that we were just looking at here inside of our images directory. There it is. That's, again, the nano server WIM that we copied from the installation media. If we place our cursor on that line and hit run selection, this should show us our two images. We have Nano Server Standard and Nano Server Data Center. Well, let's mount the second one here, Nano Server Data Center, and we're going to run the same thing we did before, mount image, specify our image file, specify our index of 2, that's the data center one, and then our mount directory, and we'll mount this to the same exact directory we just did with our previous image. So I'm going to go ahead and run this selection, and I'll just take a second. A lot shorter because Nano Server is a lot smaller. You'll notice this all goes much quicker in the Nano Server world. And there we go. We're mounted. Let's say that we wanted to add a package, specifically the containers package. So we're going to reference the packages directory in the Nano Server directory right on the installation media. And we're going to specify the package path and add package, just like we did above. Same thing. You can add package here to add updates, or in Nano Server's case, these packages that are implemented as roles and features. So I'm going to go ahead and run that. It's going to pull that package right off the installation media and inject it right into this image. Done. We now have container support inside of our image. Cool. So now once again, we could unmount the image and discard those changes, or we could commit them. Let's go ahead and commit them. So that containers package will be added right into our Nano Server image. So that's the old DISM command line utility, and the best way to learn this stuff and get familiar with these common parameters is to just play with it. Rather than opening up a command prompt, though, and execute line by line, open up your favorite text editor like we did here, and just enter all these commands, just like you see here. That way you kind of get the big picture, and you can see the similarities and start to understand how the syntax works. Let's move on to PowerShell here and look at how we can accomplish a lot of the same stuff we just did, only using purely PowerShell. Let's begin by taking a peek inside of that DISM module to see what commandlets are available to us here in PowerShell. So place your cursor on that line, let's run selection, and you'll see some similarities in here. Check it out, remove Windows driver, remove Windows package. If we scroll up a little bit here, you'll see a get Windows image. That's the equivalent of get image info. Get Windows driver, get Windows package. There's a mount Windows image, that's what we'll be using to mount with. There's a dismount Windows image. And Microsoft actually provides us with a page that shows the old way of doing it in the old DISM command line utility and the parameters that map to which PowerShell commandlets. And that's extremely valuable, especially if you're an old pro at DISM and you want to quickly understand how to do things in PowerShell. That page can help a ton. But let's start here by running a get Windows image. Let's run both of these actually, because what this will do is run a get Windows image against our install.wim and our nanoserver.wim. And this is going to return a lot of the same information that we saw with get Windows image, just formatted a little bit nicer. But as we scroll up here, there is install.wim in those 4 images, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And next up is our nanoserver.wim with our indexes of 1 and 2. Now, let's say that we wanted to mount. Let's mount our server core image that we made all of those changes to and see if those changes stuck. So we'll run a mount Windows image, pass in the image path, pass in our mount point and our index. So you'll see a lot of similarities, very similar, just a lot easier on the eyes and easier to work with. It's more intuitive because, of course, it's PowerShell. So let's go ahead and run that line of code, and that'll just go ahead and mount that right to our mount point. All right, we are now mounted, and if we scroll down a little bit here, we can start adding drivers, packages, and enabling roles and features. So if we run a get Windows driver against our mount point here, we should see that our one driver that we added and saved in this image with the old DISM command line utility should be there. And this is the driver right here that we removed, and check it out, there is that driver. Now let's take that driver that we removed and add it back in with an add Windows driver. And done. It's now in. Now if we run again a get Windows driver, we should see both of those drivers are now inside of the server core image. There they are. Cool. So you get the idea here, right? We can add packages the same way, view packages. We can install roles and features. We can do a get Windows optional feature. If you omit the feature name, it'll actually get us a list of all the roles and features and their current state. If you add the feature name, it's just like getting feature info on a specific feature. So this should actually show us that our IIS web server role is installed. And look at that, there it is, enabled, as well as all of the features that it requires because we passed the all switch into that. And again, if we just wanted to see a specific feature here, we could add the feature name parameter with get Windows optional feature, and it'll just show us that DHCP server. And again, this will be the same information we saw there out of DISM. If we wanted to enable it, we could run an enable Windows optional feature. Again, pass in the path to our mount point, pass in our feature name. So if we wanted to add DHCP here, which by the way is currently disabled, as you can see, we can run that, and that'll enable it. Then we can also disable it. So very similar to how we do it in DISM, just with PowerShell. And finally, any changes that we make, we run a dismount Windows image. And again, we can pass in save, or we can pass in discard if we didn't want to save those. So I'm going to pass in discard this time and hit execute. And all that we just did will now not be saved. Now, we can also use the PowerShell commandlets as well as the old DISM command line utility to mount and service VHDs and VHDXs, our virtual hard drives. And the process works pretty much the same way, except this time we mount our VHD or VHDX, and your index will be 1 since we only have one operating system running on that virtual hard disk. But this all pretty much works the same way. And by the way, I've got our NanoNug machine, our NanoNug VHD here from a previous directory right there. And you also notice that it gives us a shortcut right here to that actual mounted drive for the VHDX. But look at that, our NanoNug machine that we used in the previous Nugget is now mounted and ready to go. So now we could add a package into it. Here, let's add the IIS package right into that VHD. Done, that was quick. And now we could dismount and save the changes. So those are the many ways that we can